So good morning once again. The precepts. I have talked for the last 3 times, I think, something like that, as we've had the precepts renewal. Last time we talked about the refuges. So today we move into the main body of the precepts, which we begin with the Pure Precepts, and then we go to the Grey Precepts. Place I'd like to start this is to just reground this on, so what are these precepts? Where do they come from? So just a little bit of history on the precepts, because we're now getting into the body of the precepts themselves, what we say, I vow to. Buddha's original teaching was a graduated teaching. He said, start off with generosity. Once you've figured out how to let go of yourself a little bit, generosity isn't giving away junk you don't care about, it's giving stuff that matters. Once you've started learning to give away things that matter to you, then move into a broader array of morally good, morally upright behavior, virtuous behavior, which is moving into the precepts. And then when you're grounded in that, then you're ready to start moving into the Four Noble Truths and the meditation practices. Until you've got some stability in virtuous practice, the noise that comes up in a meditation and mindfulness practice is just too much to be able to settle down and do much with it. So it's this graduated path. So the precepts come in as a step in that graduated path. They're not exclusive to Buddhism. Most of our world religions have something akin to this. This came out of traditions thousands of years old in northern India, and the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, as far as I can tell, do a pretty good job of documenting a parallel trajectory, which comes down to us as the meditation aspect, contemplative aspect of Hinduism today. And within the yoga tradition, there are the 5 yamas. There are the niyamas as well, which are internal, but the 5 yamas are the precepts, basically. And they're very close to the same 5 precepts that exist in the early Pali tradition, and which are the lay precepts for the Theravadan tradition. So these are just basic grounding moral behaviors, the basic 5 precepts. They don't kill, ahimsa in the which is non-violence in the Yoga Sutra tradition. Don't kill, don't steal, or don't take what's not freely given. Don't lie, and that's satya, which is truth. So don't lie. Don't engage in sexual misconduct, and don't cloud the mind with intoxicants. Those are the 5 basic precepts, which is, what's wrong with living your life with just a little bit of this as a guide. So as practice started becoming more serious, people started hanging out with the Buddha a little bit. He added to those, and these then become. There's 3 more, which are don't sleep on high beds, don't eat at the wrong time, which is after lunchtime. In monastics in that tradition, eat before noon, so don't eat after noon. And then no jewelry or ornaments or entertainment. Right? These on full moon and half moon ceremonies in Southern Asia, Southeastern Asia, or Southern Asia, I guess. These are ones that lay practitioners will take for a day. They'll just adopt that for the day when they're going to observe with the monastic community. Sometimes lay practitioners will go live in the monastery for a while, and these are then the additional little layer of precept they take on when they go live in the monastery. So within that, I'm going to go back to the 5, because this then colours how this emerges in the Mahayana tradition. Oh, there's a piece I missed. As the monks started living together much more, they moved from being this framework for training, which is what I've been describing, to being a framework for governing smooth behavior within a monastic environment. So they became a code. It was no longer just a way of working on practice, yourself and externally. It then became a behavior code. And in the Theravadan tradition, there are, I believe the number is 227 precepts in the Patimokkha. Patimokkha is, I forget, something along the lines of path, and mokkha is awakening, moksha. there are, I think it's 331 in the female code.
Yes.
So how women need another 50% more than the men is a mystery to me. But apparently women in that tradition need 50% more rules around behavior than men do. There's a story there. There's a story there.
Yeah,
there's a story there.
surprise.
Anyway, but that's in the monastic tradition. I'm going to go back to the lay precepts. There's something that interesting that happened that will come out when we get into the Sutta ones in particular, which is we went from ahimsa, which is a general concept of non-violence, to don't kill. There's a lot left out in that move, right? We went from satya, which is live in accordance with truth, to don't lie. Again, living in accordance with truth is a whole physical thing. It's not just not lying. So there's something that's lost there. The same as brahmacharya. Brahmacharya, charya is, it's a practice towards a Brahma, the way of, so it's the practice, living the practice, the way of life of Brahma, divinity. Just as in the Brahma Viharas is the abode of divinity. So brahmacharya is this very broad, sweeping idea of living in accordance with truth. It becomes celibacy. Go figure. I mean, celibacy and appropriate sexual behavior is a really important concept and an important practice, don't get me wrong, but there's a lot lost as we come down. Right. Anyway, so we've got those 5 lay practices. Then when we move to the Mahayana tradition, Mahayana, we've just gone through a whole bunch of stuff here about saving all beings. Mahayana vows celebrate something that can be kind of not seen as clearly. It's there in the Theravadan traditions, and it's very much part of that way of life and that practice, but it's not vocal, it's not articulated as strongly, which is doing that practice for the benefit of others, saving beings. So as this moved to the Mahayana tradition, as the Mahayana tradition started bringing in precepts, the 2 things, a number of things happened. One, it's a very fragmented tradition, so there's lots and lots of different ways of doing this. And there are all sorts of monastic codes out there. As far as I can tell, I don't know any of them, but as best I can tell, they largely follow the Patimokkha, Pratimoksha, the Theravadan monastic code. Which, by the way, if you're ever interested, it's a really difficult read, but it's really interesting because it's got all these complicated rules and the consequences and the arbitration procedures for complaining and resolving and all the rest. There are also just some amazing little stories in there. Really, some of them sort of, these people, they're doing people stuff. There's a lot of fairly explicit sexual stuff in there, for instance. I mean, these are people and real problems that they're dealing with. All right, so that's the monastic side, but the rest, the 5, the overlay of these become vows that guide us toward being bodhisattvas. So the precepts in the Mahayana tradition shift from being training wheels, training practices, to being specifically training practices to guide us towards becoming bodhisattvas, which are beings who exist in the world to help save other beings, to help relieve suffering of other beings. And so the 5 were expanded and played upon a little bit to embellish and bring that valence into it. And the whole flavor of them was shifted towards that. In the Tibetan tradition in particular, they became 18 major and 48 minor precepts. And there are four schools in Tibetan tradition. A couple of them are very different from the others, but it's the same 18 and 48 across all 3. So then you've got the rest of Mahayana Buddhism, which is these 10, except there's this dude Dogen who showed up in 13th century Japan who said, we're going to have 11. 12, 16, I'll make it 16, we'll have 16. So what we chanted here, which is 16, it is the 3 refuges, the 3 pure precepts, and the 10 grave precepts, is something that was actually created by Dogen in the Soto Zen tradition in Japan. So it's not just that this is his version of it. The 10 are pretty common. There are nuances, but the 10 are pretty common, and we use his commentary. But bringing the other 6 in as precepts is specific to the Soto tradition. So taking refuge is very common. It's just not normally done. It's universal in Buddhism, really, but it's just not normally done within the body of the precepts. So regarding those as precepts is a little different. We talked about that last time. The 3 pure precepts is what I will spend the rest of my time here talking about today, which are specific to Soto Zen. But I happen to think they're really useful, really interesting, and kind of important. They're kind of important. The way we chant them, you've got in front of you, and we just went through it. I'll go through the way we chant them in more detail. But in simple terms, what the simplest translation and version of them is along the lines of do no harm, do good, save all beings. That's the simplest way of looking at these 3. Do no harm, do good, save all beings. So, stepping through the language we have here, I vow to refrain from all evil. Evil in Buddhism? Really? Well, evil in Buddhism means greed, anger, and illusion. That's what it's about. To engage in evil action is to engage with anger, to engage with greed, or to engage from a place of ignorance. And there are not external consequences. It's not like there's somebody sitting out there with a big mallet and he says, you did this, this happens to you. The consequences of evil action is self-imposed. It's all back to the story of karma, which we talked about in a previous one of these conversations. So if one engages in action out of greed, that has consequences for oneself. But of course has consequences for other people, but the impact on self is entirely self-imposed. Those come from the 3 feeling tones of pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. If you look at the 12-link chain of causation, which is how this whole mess, this wonderful, beautiful, extraordinary mess of suffering arises, right? It all comes, it's described in this 12-link chain of causation, which starts with ignorance and then moves through layers of consciousness and the senses and on up to birth, sickness, old age, and death. Fairly early in that are the feeling tones. And once there's a contact is either pleasant, could be eye contact, ear contact, but physical contact. It's either going to be pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. We're sucked into pleasant things, we're repelled from unpleasant things. So what we judge it to be, of course, it's not absolutely pleasant or absolutely unpleasant, and we just don't notice neutral things. So those grow as we engage further up this escalating chain of becoming. Positive things become greed, negative feeling tones, unpleasant feeling tones become anger or loathing, and neutral feeling tones are just ignorance because you just don't see it. So these all come straight out of the basic premise of the practice of Buddhism. Hence, this practice of not acting out of those 3 is the abode of the law of all Buddhas. That is the foundation of the law of all Buddhas. It is the source. It is the source. What causes ignorance? What causes suffering? Ultimately, we go all the way back to ignorance. It is the source of the law. And law is, in this case, is a translation of a translation of a translation, but the root word is dharma. And dharma, law is an important meaning, but it is also, dharma also is the nature of a thing as it is. So this is the dharma of the Buddhas. I vow to make every effort to live in enlightenment. Now I get a little confused with this framing of it between the do good and save all beings. And the truth is they're all different facets of the same thing anyway. So I'm going to move away from that model and just talk about these 2 as they stand right there. So I vow to make every effort to live in enlightenment. I vow to wake up. I vow to see things clearly. I vow to see things as it is. I vow to work on recognizing there is no independent, permanent thing here called me. This is entirely contingent, changing all the time, and doesn't exist without all of you and everything else. I vow to live in enlightenment. I make every effort to live in enlightenment, to be that all the time. So then we have these three statements underneath. Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi is complete perfect enlightenment. I go to two different things here. One is there's a long version of the Soto Meal chant in which we practicing the emptiness of the three wheels: giver, receiver, and gift. And in the context of the meal, obviously that's the food. But the three wheels: giver, receiver, and gift. Subject, object, and whatever's moving between subject and object. That's what's going on here. The one who practices, the path of the one who practices, that which is practiced, and then the awakening itself. So this is the realized state, the one who practices, and that which moves between the two. It's those three things. Another way that this comes out, this is actually out of the Bhagavad Gita, which is the traditional Hindu meal chant, which is Brahman is the ritual, Brahman is the offering, Brahman is the one who offers to that which is Brahman. Now this is not, in the Gita, it's not done in the context of food, but it's been taken as a meal verse. But if you think about that as everything in our lives, everything we do, and think of Brahman as just as Buddha nature, as emptiness, as awakening. Brahman is the ritual. It's just the engaging in life. Our life is a ritual. Brahman is the offering, which is that which we do, that which we give. Brahman is the one who gives the offering. I am Buddha nature. To the fire that is Brahman, which is, where's it going to? It's all Buddha nature, the whole ball of wax. Right? So that's what this is describing. It's describing it's not creating this soggy, mushy goo of universal nothingness. It's celebrating the separate existence, but looking at the nature of into being between them all. I vow to live and be lived for the benefit of all beings, transcending profane and holy, and taking self and others across. This feels like another way of saying the same thing to me. Transcending profane and holy. There is no profane, there is no holy. We tend to think of this while it's practicing as profane, this once it's woken up as holy. But there's no difference. There's actually no real difference. There is a real difference, and yet there isn't, right? But this is pointing at it's moving up. Let me start that again. It's not that there's no difference, but when looked at from the place of awakening, there is actually no difference. Looked at from this side, there is a difference. Looked at from the other side, there is no difference. So it's transcending, seeing those differences. It's transcending that level of judgment and saving all beings, helping all beings move to that place of awakening where they too no longer see themselves as separate from everything. They're still there to help, but they no longer feel themselves as separate from everything. Alright, so we have gone over the Pure Precepts. Next time, I'll basically pass the verse